Clutter is the enemy of peace. A messy life leads to a messy mind. Only when we let go of chaos can we truly achieve inner harmony, where silence replaces noise, where your soul can finally exhale. Breathe in, breathe out. Now ask yourself, do you really need 6 different versions of Adventure Island on the NES? No, you don't. Very often when you buy a retro doodad, it comes with games all pre-installed and ready to go. Is that legal? Well, how the heck should I know? I'm not a lawyer. I did ask a lawyer once, but he just said, "What? Who are you? Leave me alone. I'm eating dinner with my family." So I don't think even lawyers know. Depending on which company you get your doodad from, it might come with no games, or it might be a good game library, very complete with proper game names, or it may be a janky, messy pile of confusing garbage. And very often you'll get a device that has a great ROM library for some systems, but then other systems aren't good. It's almost as if the doodad makers are using ROM sets that they just grabbed online and slapped them on their devices without thinking too much about if they're any good at all. Almost. There are quite a few devices with good ROM sets out there, but they tend to be the more boutique products. For example, LITNXT sells a special SD card for the Miyoo Mini and the Miyoo Mini Plus that has amazing ROM sets. Super well organized and well curated with scraped art and stuff all ready to rock. They also make these cards for the TrimUI Smart Pro and the TrimUI Brick, and also now the G350. I just got this one the other day from LITNXT and it's just as good on here. And you can take these ROMs to your other devices. If you just want to buy a product that has a great ROM library, this is probably the one I'd suggest. I made a few videos about these custom systems from LITNXT. I'll link to a few of those in the description below. And there's other systems out there that you can get, like these emulation drives that come with a massive collection of games. These are honestly really neat products. I love them, but they're probably overkill for most people. Most people don't need every PS1 and PSP and Nintendo DS game or whatever, or even all the GameCube and Wii games. They actually make really big hard drives for those. Again, I'll toss some links to my videos for these in the description below if you want to see what they're about. The reason I bring up these pre-made products is because lots of people want a shortcut. They want to buy something and not have to deal with doing it themselves. Some people might call them lazy, but I would call them people with money who would rather spend some money to get a thing than do it themselves. So I'm glad these products exist for those people. However, the point of this video is how to do it yourself, how to build the perfect ROM collection for you. But even if you want to take a shortcut and buy something, watch the video because I made it. I made the video to be watched, and if you don't watch it, then I did it for nothing. Before we get into the weeds, let's quickly touch on other ways you can get your games besides buying something. And I can't tell you where to get games. I'm sorry. It's against the YouTube community guidelines. I would personally never download a game. All the games that you're going to see in this video, I owned. That's right, I owned every retro game ever, and I backed them all up, and that's how I got all these ROM files. And then one day, the originals were all destroyed in a fire. The receipts too, they burned up. You can't prove it didn't happen. So it's lucky that I have all these backups and I can keep enjoying these games. However, if I was interested in downloading retro games, I would go to Google and search for the complete ROM set of any system that I wanted. I would also consider adding the term 1G1R, which means one game, one ROM with an English North American priority, which is good because that means when I'm browsing my library, I won't have to deal with duplicate games and foreign language games, just the important stuff that'll be relevant for me. And when it comes to arcade ROM sets, the short version is that the Final Burn Neo ROM set is the one I'd be looking to get, specifically the Final Burn Neo Unmerged ROM collection. For higher end stuff like GameCube and PS2, if I was looking for that, I think I'd want to find some sort of ROMs and BIOS mega thread. That sounds like the sort of thing that would let me know where to find the stuff I needed. If only such a thing existed. Let's begin with a bit of a tour. I want to show you my personal ROM collection, what would I have included and how I have it organized. This is a 1 terabyte SD card that I use for my Android devices, and this is a 128 gigabyte SD card from one of my Linux devices. Obviously, Android devices are more powerful and they can play more stuff like GameCube and PS2 or whatever. And the Linux devices can't play that high-end stuff, but both Android and Linux can play lower-end stuff like Super Nintendo and arcade and Game Boy. that sort of thing. So my approach is to have a common set of the old systems that I put on every device. I call this the TechDweeb Core. Basically, it's my own personal curated set that has all the stuff from the older systems. And then a hand-picked collection of the higher-end stuff like Dreamcast and Nintendo DS and PS1 and PSP. For higher-end devices or devices with more storage, I'll add stuff on top of that. I'll add extra games, but the core is a single thing that is unified across all my devices. What's in the TechDweeb Core, you ask? Well, I'll tell you, but only if you subscribe. Okay, good. I'll tell you now. I have chosen to be selective in which retro systems make it into the TechDweeb Core. These are the systems that I've decided are the ones that I'll actually play, but there is stuff missing. Like for example, in television. I don't ever play in television games, so I don't need them cluttering up my list. I have Intellivision games backed up on my archive, which we'll talk about, so I can play them if I need to, but when it comes to handhelds, I don't need them there. The TechDweeb Core is the perfect set of systems for me, stuff I actually want to play, and that's part of the beauty of actually doing this yourself. Pick the systems that are important to you and only have those systems as part of your core. My core consists of arcade games, and the ROM set I've chosen for this is Final Burn Neo, and then I have the Atari systems, 2600 and 5200 and 7800. Complete sets for all of those. I have a few DOS games in my core, but mostly because I like testing DOS on various devices. There's not much here though. I have a whole different setup for DOS, so check out this video if you want to know more about how I play DOS games. Next up is PC Engine, or TurboGrafx 16 as we called it here in Canada. And then the Nintendo systems, NES and Game Boy and Super Nintendo. N64 is actually part of my core. The entire North American ROM set is less than 5 gigabytes, so that made it in. And then Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, my favorite retro system. I have a decent handful of my favorite Nintendo DS games in my core as well. All the best games and my favorites that I might play. Actually, let's take a break and talk about that. Some systems, you're going to want all the games for that system in your core, since you can fit the entire system's library in like a gig or two maybe. But some systems like Nintendo DS, that had thousands of games, and some of them were pretty big, and that whole ROM set is just too big to be part of my core. So that's one system where I picked a few of my favorite games to be part of my core. Anyways, next up we have the Sega systems. Sega Master System and Sega Mega Drive, which we call Genesis here in Canada, and Game Gear, of course. Complete ROM sets for all of those. And Sega Saturn, I have just a few games, a few of my favorites. Same with Dreamcast, just a couple of my favorites in there. I'll add more Dreamcast games to devices with more storage as I want them, but I only need a few in my core. Neo Geo, complete set of that, one of my favorite systems to emulate. And then I have PS1. Again, here, not every game because they can get pretty big, but I have a small collection of games that are part of my core that I want on every device. And PSP, same thing there, just a few of my favorites in there. So this is just my core. I keep this easily accessible on my computer to copy to devices. However, I also have my big collection, the archive, which has all of the old systems, including Intellivision or those other systems that I don't emulate on a regular basis. And also the high-end stuff, all the GameCube games and all the PS1 and Dreamcast and Wii games, all the DS games and all the PSP games, and a ton of 3DS and Switch and PS3 and Xbox 360. And that's all kept on a hard drive. This is the hard drive I use. It's a 12 terabyte hard drive, and even though, like I said, this is all the backups that I have from my personal collection that was destroyed in a fire, wink wink, if you want a shortcut to building a huge collection of games, check out this video link below where I review a 12 terabyte hard drive that looks suspiciously like this hard drive. They also make smaller ones, like this cheaper 4 terabyte version. Link to that video below as well. So this is my big archive, and I can always add games from this onto devices whenever I need to. For example, maybe I decide a specific device deserves a 256 gigabyte SD card. So I will start by putting on my 128 gigabyte TechDweeb Core, and then I'll copy over a bunch of other high-end stuff. I'll basically pack it full of extra Dreamcast and PS1 and PSP. And then, like I said, I have a 1 terabyte card for my Android retro handhelds. And that has, you guessed it, the TechDweeb Core, and also just tons of PS1 and Dreamcast and DS, and a big collection of GameCube and Wii and PS2, and tons of PSP because I love playing PSP on widescreen Android devices like the RP5. A few Switch games on there, but not tons because I usually usually don't bother with Switch emulation, and making things like this, a 1TB games card. It's actually super easy when you have your core set and an archive of the rest. You can put this sort of thing together on the fly as you need it really easily. For the rest of the video, I'm specifically going to talk about the core, not the extra stuff, because it's the same concept, but keeping it focused on the core is important because this is going to be like your main ROM set. And this is the one thing that you want to be as clean and perfect as possible because it's going to be on all your devices. Starting with a 1G 1R ROM set is going to put you in a good situation for organization because you're not going to have duplicate files or foreign language games to deal with. However, you still might want to trim it down. There's a few types of ROMs in the 1G 1R collection that I got rid of. The first is sample games and demos. You can keep those if you want to, if you find them interesting, but I only want full released games. So if you open up a directory and search for sample and also demo, you're gonna find those and you can delete those. Same thing with prototypes. Search for proto and you can find those that way and delete them if you want to. And finally, do a search for UNL, which stands for unlicensed games. These are third-party things that came out for the consoles or games that were never officially released. It's sort of like bootleg games kind of thing. I got rid of most of them. You can leave all this stuff if you don't care, but since I want these ROM sets to be super crispy clean, I spend the time to go through each system and get rid of the clutter. There are two systems that you might want to put in some extra work for, which is PS1 and DOS. That's because those systems often have multiple files for the same game. A PS1 game might be in bin and queue format, which is going to have like the music for the game as a bunch of separate track files, and even if the discs are in some sort of image format, you still have multiple disk files for those multiple disc games. So the same game could appear in your games list multiple times, which isn't ideal if you don't want to have to scroll through so many of the same games. It's just kind of messy looking. And then you don't know which one you should pick when you want to play. The way that you can handle this is with .m3u files, which are basically playlist files. In your PS1 folder, you can create another folder called multi. And any game that has multiple files for it, put it in that multi folder. And then for that game in the PS1 directory, you'll create a new text file. Name the text file the same name as your game, but make the extension .m3u instead of .txt. And then open the text file with your text editor of choice. Now in here, you'll have a list of all the files for each disk of your game. So type out multi/ the name of your game file that you put in the multi folder. If it's an image format like ISO or CHD or PBP, you can put that here. And if it's bin and queue format, you'll link to the queue file in here. If your game has multiple disks, then on the second line of this file, you'll put the same thing, multi/ the name of your game file, but you'll link to the disk 2 of that game. There should be one link for each disk of your game in this file. And when you're done, save it. And that's it. And now when you load up your library in most front ends, you'll see that .m3u file listed instead of a whole bunch of files. And you can load up that M3U and play the game. If your game is multi-disc, then you can switch disks through the RetroArch quick menu and selecting disk control. For DOS, it's a bit different because with DOS games, usually you get a zip, and in that zip it has all the files for the game. This actually works fine. You can run your games from the zip, but it can sometimes cause problems when the game needs to save a config file or something. It can't save it into the zip. My preferred method is to unzip the game, but don't leave the folder the default name. Add .pc to the end of the folder name, and then open that folder, and in here, create a new text file called DOSBox, but make the extension .bat instead of .txt. And then open that file to edit in your text editor of choice, and in here, you're gonna type the path to the main executable file of your game. And on my Retro Doodad, I can load that up as if it's a ROM, and it automatically boots into the game. And that's pretty much it. There's other stuff to talk about with like organizing games and scraping artwork and favorites lists and save games and syncing your stuff across devices. Way too much stuff to get into here for all that extra stuff. But honestly, what we talked about today is more important than that stuff. None of the extra organization stuff matters if the base set of games you're working from is messy. This is the method that I've used to make the best ROM set for me. I put so much love and care into this ROM set, and I'm still making minor changes here or there, but all the hard work is already done. And it's made having retro doodads and using them to browse games and play games just so much less annoying. And I love having the TechDweeb Core because that creates a consistent ROM set for the vast majority of retro systems that is the same on every device that I have. Also, don't ask me for the TechDweeb Core. I'm not going to get into sharing that. If you want the TechDweeb Core, I already showed you how to make it, so make your own. Or just buy one of those cards that I told you about from LITNXT if you want a shortcut. Lots of ways to get where you need to be. Just like life if you think about it. Many roads to walk. Which one is the right road for you? Well, most folk will say it's the road that leads to subscribing to TechDweeb. But I can't do that for you. I can only show you the road. You need to walk it, my friend. I don't know why I'm suddenly doing a southern accent. A very, very bad southern accent. But we've come this far, and there ain't no turning back. Thanks for joining me, partner. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.